Let's talk about something that we all face but rarely like to admit. Failure. Yep, that dreaded F word. Feeling like a failure sucks. It just really sucks. Everything feels heavy and you're questioning everything. Your goals, your worth, maybe even your sanity. Truth is, failure isn't the end of the road. It's actually one of life's best teachers. And I know this not just from theory, but from my own messy, imperfect experiences. I've failed a lot. Like, a lot. But I like to believe, and I've definitely been told often, that resilience and perseverance are some strong qualities of mine. I just never let go. It's almost annoying at times. I find that people love to talk about their successes, but they often gloss over the failures that came before them. And that's a shame because failure is important. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also where some of the most meaningful growth happens. And that's what makes us human. In fact, research on resilience has shown how people who embrace failure as a learning opportunity persist through challenges at a significantly higher rate than those who don't, which leads to greater success in the long run. I'm going to share some tips on how to bounce back from failure, but I'd like to highlight something even more important to me. We need to normalize not hiding our failures. We've got to stop pretending our failures don't exist. Vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's one of the most human things about us. It's often how we connect with each other, it's what makes us relatable, and that's what this whole project of mine is all about. When you're a beginner at just anything, vulnerability is part of the process. It's messy, it's awkward, and yes, it's scary, but it's also where the magic happens. And my goal with my project, The Bold Beginner, is to create a space for women especially, where it's okay to be vulnerable, and to embrace that messiness of trying something new. Though if you're a guy and you can relate to this, you're welcome here too, of course. Which, by the way, if you want to help creating a supportive community of women beginners based on kindness and empathy, make sure you subscribe. Show some love. Back to the failure topic. Actually, right now, as I'm recording this, I'm recovering from a very tough burnout. The type of burnout that makes you question whether you'll ever feel like yourself again. But honestly, each failure, each tough moments has taught me something valuable, and I want to share some of these lessons. The first lesson I've learned is that we need to redefine failure for what it is, a temporary state. Failure isn't permanent unless we let it be. It's not this giant stamp on your forehead that says you're done. It's more like a detour sign, annoying, sure, but ultimately guiding us somewhere better. But it's so easy to let just one setback spiral into self-doubt, isn't it? I read that the word failure comes from the Proto-Indo-European root that means to fall or stumble, and that's all failure is. A stumble, a temporary setback. I used to think that failure was proof that I wasn't good enough. But here's what I learned. Every failure is a chance to recalibrate. It's like life's way of saying, okay, this didn't work, that's fine, let's try something else. All those moments were training sessions for life with a personal trainer. And the only reason I failed was because I dared to try in the first place. That alone is worth celebrating. Every attempt, no matter the outcome, builds resilience and makes you a little stronger. The second lesson I've learned is to try and not fall into the expectations trap. How often do we set these unrealistic expectations for ourselves? And I think as women, we're particularly bad at that. Like, we expect to master a skill in only a few weeks or to build a dream project overnight. And it's become tough to not be wired that way with all the gurus that are advertising online and promising that we can be successful in only a few weeks. And when it doesn't happen, we feel like we failed. I've been guilty of this many, many times. I think the worst for me has been learning how to dance in the past few years. I talk about it a lot because it's become such an important part of my life. But basically, I used to get frustrated because I wasn't good enough after literally a few weeks. Which is ridiculous. Progress, not perfection, is what matters. That's what I've come to realize. Small wins deserve to be celebrated, like finally nailing that one move that I've been practicing for a month, or just showing up to practice. A study showed that the average person has about 4 small wins a day, which is 1,460 small wins every year. And 87% of the surveyees said that those small wins were crucial for them to power through the day. That's very true for me. So now, every time that I hit a small milestone, I celebrate. It doesn't matter if it's just having a small toast with my boyfriend or having a dinner with some friends. I just do something. And it's a good reminder, again, that progress and not perfection is what matters. The third lesson that I've learned is to lean into my negative emotions when I feel like a failure, and then snap out of it. We don't talk about it enough, but it's okay to feel like crap when you fail. In fact, it's even important to lean into those negative feelings. Ignoring emotions doesn't work. It just buries them until they resurface, stronger. It's basically like pretending it's sunny during a rainstorm. When I hit burnout, I tried to push through. I really tried to push through hard. I thought that resting was wasting time. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. Ignoring what I needed only made things worse. Way worse. Now I've learned to pause, process, give myself space to recharge. Honestly, resting isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Even professional athletes who are known to push through, they make sure that they have a rest day as part of their weekly practice. The next lesson I've learned is to fail fast and learn faster. Now that we've switched the perspective on failure a bit, I think you understand that failure actually saves you time. And I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. Every time you fail, you figure out what doesn't work, which gets you closer to what does. I'll give a business example because that's usually what speaks most to people. One of my early business ventures failed spectacularly. It worked great until it just didn't. It's been painful, excruciating even, but dissecting what went wrong taught me lessons that I've carried into every project since. So if you're failing, you're learning. And if you're learning, you're growing. That reminds me of a book that you've most definitely heard of. You've probably even read it. If you haven't, you definitely should. It's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It's technically only about building startups, but its core principle, fail fast and learn faster, you can definitely apply to all areas of your life. It's all about testing things quickly, learn from what doesn't work, and use those lessons to move forward. And that's basically what life is all about. That's why now I use failure as a fast track to mastery. You definitely want to fail fast and correct your mistakes fast. The next lesson is kind of the consequence of the one that I just mentioned. It's to start before you're ready. I already mentioned that the overnight success that's promised everywhere is not real. However, what's true is that you should start before you're ready, so that precisely you can fail fast and learn from it. And let's be honest, you'll never feel 100% ready anyway. I'll elaborate a little bit on the failed business venture that I mentioned earlier. Trust me, when I started that business, I was terrified. I did not have all the answers, and honestly, I made tons of mistakes. But I cared so deeply about the cause that I wanted to fight for that I started anyway. It was a monster of a project. When I think about it retrospectively, it was like a titan to take on. It really felt like David and Goliath. I'll give you a bit of context just so you understand the magnitude of that business. I wanted so bad to reduce waste pollution in Southeast Asia that me and my co-founder started this tech startup to increase waste collection in underserved villages in Indonesia. It was a sort of Uber mobile app for waste collection, if you will. So you can imagine how difficult of a project it was to implement. And even though we couldn't take it to where we'd hoped, when I think about it now, we've had some insane wins. And that includes better managing several tons of waste in several villages in Indonesia, educating thousands of people about how harmful waste pollution can be, building a whole functional app that supported hard-working local collectors. And that's insane when I think about it. That's definitely something to be proud of. And that's the whole issue with feeling like a failure. It makes you ignore all the wins. And all those wins happened only because I started when I was not ready. I'm actually planning to make another video about the lessons that I've learned building that business. So whenever I do, it will be linked somewhere here, or wherever on the screen. And by the way, the same applies to my current project. I'm new to content creation, but I didn't wait for a perfect setup or a perfect plan. I just started. And each post that I'm writing, each video that I'm making, each attempt is teaching me something new. So if I can leave you with one piece of advice, it's this: better done than perfect. It sounds definitely better in French, but you get the idea. The seventh lesson is to face your fear. You've ever heard that saying, everything that you've always wanted is on the other side of fear? That may sound cliche, but it's very true. Fear loves to exaggerate things. It makes the unknown this huge, terrifying monster that convinces you to stay in your cozy little bubble. But the problem with comfort zones is that they're comfy, sure, but they're also cages. They keep you stuck. I told you when I started my business in Indonesia, I was terrified. I kept asking myself, what if I fail? What will people think? What if I'm not good enough? And by the way, I did fail. And it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's not even the end of my world. I'm still here. If I take a personal example for a bit of a change, when I started solo traveling about 10 years ago, it was a big leap for me. That first trip that I took, man, I was nervous. I was going to new places with new languages. You have to imagine at the time I couldn't even hold a proper conversation in English. But overcoming my fear made me understand that I could handle way more than I thought, even when it was overwhelming, especially when it was overwhelming. And that's not saying that fear is always a bad thing. Sometimes it's here for a reason, to protect us, like telling us, hey, maybe don't try jumping off that cliff. But most of the time it's discomfort. And if fear is showing up only because you're stepping out of your comfort zone, that's usually a sign that you're on the right track. Another major lesson that I've learned to bounce back from failure is to be resourceful. Now, quick question. When you hit a roadblock, what's the first thing you do? Because I'll tell you mine, I Google the heck out of it. Seriously, Google is your friend is basically my life motto. The amount of free resources that's out there is insane. You've got YouTube, podcasts, forums, blogs, free courses, you name it. It's all at our fingerprints. And honestly, I'm always surprised at the amount of people that don't think of doing a quick search as their first reflex. Like, why not? When I started The Bold Beginner, I had no idea what I was doing. So I watched YouTube tutorials, I signed up to free courses, I joined online communities. It wasn't instant, but I learned so much out of it on web design, SEO, basically everything. And it saved me hours of frustration. Just because you're resourceful doesn't mean that you're going to figure everything out, but it means that you trust that there's a solution out there and that you believe enough in yourself to try and find it. Last lesson that I've learned, and probably the toughest one for me, is to know when to let go. I told you in the beginning of this video that I never let go. It's actually a problem of mine. Like, it's great to be resilient and all, but sometimes you need to know your limits and when you should let go. Sometimes the hardest part is literally to figure out when to keep going and when to walk away. But honestly, deep down, we usually know. I'll never forget something that one of my mentors once told me. He said, make sure that you leave no stone unturned so that you have no regrets down the line. It's a very simple piece of advice, and that's honestly what works best for me. It's helped me so much, and especially when I had to let go of my business that I mentioned earlier. It was such a tough decision. I had poured so much of myself into it. But eventually I had to accept that it just wasn't working anymore. And you know what? That decision made space for better things to come. I've learned that letting go isn't giving up. It's about making room for something better. And yes, it's scary, but it's also freeing. Remember, you're not defined by your failures. You're defined by how you rise after them. If this video resonates with you, make sure you share your thoughts in the comments. And if you need a little more encouragement, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Keep going. You've got this.